Hey, good morning, everybody. Matt Zerby here from Wasco Nursery, and I am coming to you live from one of our growing fields. I thought it would be fun today to just take you, not so much on a tour because that would take forever, but just show you a little bit about what goes into growing trees. Many of you have purchased trees from us or been to the garden center or been to a garden center somewhere and seen balled and burlapped trees or even sometimes container grown trees, but seen these nice large spruce and birch and all sorts of other things. Every once in a while someone asks me, how old is this tree? And I think oftentimes people are surprised by the age of trees that we're selling and how long it takes to grow a good quality tree. And so I thought that today, since it's nice and dry finally, we've had three great weeks of rain. Now we've finally actually had about a week, maybe more like 10-ish days of dry weather. So the fields have dried out again, and it's easy to walk out here when we have 1.5 inches of rain or something like that. The fields can get quite muddy. So it's something that I've been wanting to do for a little while, and so I figured I'd take today as a good opportunity to do that. Let's turn the camera around and just kind of show you a little bit here. So kind of standing in the center of one of our growing fields. This property happens to be attached to the garden center, and the garden center is like way over there, off in the distance. So this is a field of Techni arborvitae right here, and I want to point out a couple of things. First of all, our nursery team has been doing an amazing job of keeping the weeds down, keeping the plants watered and healthy. One thing that you may notice here, there are no hoses, no pipes, nothing like that. So our fields get watered when we get rainfall. Now that being said, when we have brand new trees that we have just planted this season, which I'll show you here in a couple of minutes, those trees we water by hand with a very large tank. The guys drive up and down the rows and will water the trees individually. So during that kind of prolonged drought that we had, basically May and June, we basically had 2 or 3 guys and a tank and a wagon pulling up and down these rows and watering trees individually for like 5-6 days a week, and they did that for about a month and a half. Then we finally got some good rain. One of the things you'll notice is that the fields are nicely cultivated. We do not use herbicide on our farm at all. So you can kind of see this is just kind of a grassy path. We mow the grassy paths. We cultivate the fields. We work around the plants by hand to get weeds from around the base of our trees. We do not use any herbicide at all. Now, when we're in a period of drought, we instruct the nursery team not to cultivate, and the reason that we do that is we don't want to bring the moisture-rich soil that might be down below. We don't want to bring that back up to the top where it can just be allowed to dry out. So during the earlier part of the season, we had to stop cultivating and unfortunately just let the weeds go, which sometimes is okay, but sometimes it can get out of hand awfully quick. So they have done an excellent job of getting the fields back in good condition so that the plants, our plants, don't have to compete with 3-foot tall weeds and things like that. So this is a Techni arborvitae right here. So it's about waist high on me. So about 30-ish inches, maybe 36 right now. And these trees have been in the ground now for, this would be their 3rd growing season. So you can kind of see down the line, very nice and uniform arborvitae. I'm going to show you some larger ones here in just a minute to show you how long it takes to get them ready to sell. So we buy in from nurseries who specialize in propagation. Propagation is just a word for making more plants, basically. So in the case of Techni arborvitae, they're taking cuttings off of a Techni arborvitae, and then they're putting it into a growing media, allowing it to root in. They do that by the thousands or tens of thousands, and once they're rooted in and happy and growing, then they will sell them to a nursery like us, who will then raise those little baby plants on in the nursery until they're ready to dig. So our target size for Techni arborvitae is 6 to 8 feet. We do sell some smaller ones. We sell some 5 foot. We sell occasionally some 4 foot. But our target size is 6 to 8 foot. It's a wonderful screening plant, and they're very hardy. They're very easy to grow, low maintenance plants, and they don't get insanely large. Techni will get about 15-ish. They are very long-lived, so you can certainly find some that are 20 or 25 feet tall, but they're probably 50 years old. So very long-lived plant, very easy to grow, and a great screening and privacy plant. So we sell a lot of them, thus the very long row, and there's another row right on the other side over there. And so these are, as I mentioned, about 3 years old, and we're just going to take a walk. Here we are at our Techni arborvitae, that this block of trees right here. We will be actively digging trees from this field for the remainder of the summer, or the remainder of the growing season, I should say. These trees are ready to dig. They can be dug all throughout, basically from early July all the way through, for sure through October and into November. So you can see a beautiful, beautiful row along here. These trees are all most of them are 7 foot. There's a handful of 6s in here, and there's a bunch of 8s. So just to kind of give you an idea, most of these trees are about 7 to 8 years old. I should say 7 to 8 years in the ground. They were probably 1 to 2 years old when we got them, and then we plant them out here. Now, it is possible to get a plant like this to grow this big in a shorter amount of time. And the way that you can do that is with heavy fertilization and with a lot of extra water. So you might say to yourself, well, Matt, if you can do that in 5 years instead of 8 years or something along those lines, why wouldn't you do that? And the reason that we don't do that is because we want to produce the best possible trees we can. And that's not to say we don't fertilize. We do fertilize. We put manure out here. We have a couple of cattle farms and a couple of horse farms that we get manure and compost from. And we will put that out here in the fields. In fact, there is a nice pile. You can kind of see it right over there. So that is a nice pile of manure that just got brought in. There's actually a couple piles out here, and I'll kind of show you what our process is. So this particular field, you can kind of see here, we've got some spruce trees all along here and some spruce trees all along there. And then this whole center section kind of running all the way down, which looks like it's probably about 5 rows or 5 aisles wide. We dug all of the plants out of there. And then what we've been doing, I'm actually standing basically right on a pile of composted manure right in here. And so what the guys will be doing in their kind of spare time, so to speak, is they'll be taking that pile and they'll spread this out all throughout this this growing field, and then they're going to work that into the soil. So this field is resting. So we're not growing anything on this yet. We've got plants obviously over here. So we are going to let this field rest. We are going to till the weeds under. We're going to spread the manure. We're going to till that all in and get this field ready to be planted most likely next year. So this field will get planted in the spring of 2024. So we do fertilize our trees, but we're using a very low-grade manure fertilizer to feed our plants rather than very strong synthetic chemical fertilizers, we are not watering our established plant material out here. It allows them to actually grow a little bit slower and a little bit stronger. I won't name names, but there is a wholesale grower that is in the northern Illinois area that I'm aware of that does a lot of fertilization and a lot of watering. So they've got irrigation out in their fields. They're pumping water on those trees, you know, basically nonstop all throughout the growing season, and sometimes even far too late into the fall, which is just producing tons and tons of new growth. And one of a couple of things happens. The branches grow so fast that that they're just not sturdy enough to support the weight of the plant. The same thing happens in the timber industry. Not that they're necessarily watering or fertilizing those trees, but there's a big difference between some of the new growth forests and sorry, it looks like we cut out for a second there. So I was saying there's a big difference between the quality of lumber that's coming out of the new growth forests versus the old growth forests. Those old growth forests, the grain is much tighter together. The trees were growing much slower, so it produced a much sturdier piece of lumber than some of the new growth forests. And the same is kind of true here in the trees. If we can grow them a little bit slower, we end up with a much better product. And the only reason I mention that is a couple of years ago, we had a very tough polar vortex winter, and the aforementioned nursery lost thousands of trees that year in the polar vortex because their trees did not naturally go into dormancy at the appropriate time because they were what I call juicing them up. They were being watered and fed, and they were still actively growing way too late into the fall, and they didn't turn the water and the fertilizer off in time, and the cellular structure was much weaker, and unfortunately, as I mentioned, they lost thousands and thousands of trees. That same winter, we lost a handful of autumn blaze maples, and the only reason we lost them is that they developed some kind of very strange distorted trunk. They didn't die. I just felt like they were unsellable and potentially maybe weakened with these weird deformations that they had on their trunk. So we did cull those. Culling is the practice of going through, whether it's an animal herd or, in our case, a group of trees, and pulling out the ones that aren't quite going to pass muster. And in our case, we burn them. Norway spruce is our best-selling spruce. The reason being is that it is A, very fast-growing, and B, is resistant to rhizosphere and needle blight or needle cast, which is something that all of the blue spruce, Colorado spruce are dying from en masse around here. So we love Norway spruce. We have some very, very nice large Norway spruce. There's some 7-foot, 8-foot, maybe some 9-foot in here. Lots of 5s and 6s. So we're sitting pretty nicely on those. But what I wanted to do is show you sort of the progression. So there's a little baby spruce right there. And then 10 feet away, there's another one. We tend to put our trees on further spacing as well, which gives them more room to grow. And they don't end up being quite as tight together. So, like, you can look over there, and you can see the big gaps. Even though they're ready to dig, we've got a nice big gap in here. So that tree looks good all the way around. Where big production nurseries, especially the really big guys and places that are growing for huge quantity and low quality, they have those trees growing very, very close together. It produces a very skinny, kind of stretched out plant, and we don't really care for that a whole lot. Looking at the rest of the row, I'm going to say these were planted actually last year. So this is their second growing season. So some of them are making up kind of nicely. Some of them are still a little bit small. So they kind of go all along here. So that's something that was planted last year. And then we can kind of go over here and look at, this is Serbian spruce. This is one that was planted So not last year, but the previous year. So this one would have been planted in 2021. So you can kind of see the progression. They're starting to take their shape. You know, they're not as small and wiry. Starting to develop a nice, strong central leader. That's something that we are striving for. The leader is that main branch that runs up through the center of the tree. And I'm going to walk all the way across. These are, as I mentioned, Norway spruce. And then we're going to walk across and look at the Serbian spruce over here that are ready to dig. Serbian is another one that's really wonderful. Basically resistant, not entirely resistant to needle cast, but very, very resistant. So it does quite well for us. The bottom of the needle is blue, and the top of the needle is green, so it gives it that really cool two-tone appearance. So these trees here are 7 years old. So 2 years old, then we grow them on for 5 years, and we get them to about, this is like a 5-footer right here. Some of these might even be just a touch older, but I'm going to show you that cool needle coloring. So if we flip and you look underneath, it's all blue, and if I push it down, it's all green, so you kind of see that two-tone. But beautiful tree, very hardy. As they grow, they kind of just get a really slight weep to their branches. You can even see a little bit of that in this one, just a little slight weep, so they're kind of fun. These are white pine here. These are our fastest growing pines. You can see all that new growth up on the top of this one down here. So that's all new growth from right there to right up there. That's all new growth this year. So that's about 30 inches or so of new growth at the top. Of course, the whole tree didn't grow 30 inches. And then the trick with these is they want to grow so fast that they will end up with, they can end up with some big gaps in them. So we give them a little bit of a haircut when they're young to try to work those gaps out. And what I want to do is show you the sort of growth progression. You can almost see the different years worth of growth. So you can see this section right down here is really nice and full. You don't see the trunk, you don't see any gaps or holes or anything like that. And then if you go to this section right here, it's getting pretty full. You can see a little bit of a gap here and there, but not too bad, but it's getting really nice and full. And then you get to this section right here, and it's pretty open. You can see a lot of trunk, things like that. And what I like to tell people is this section is going to look like this section next year. So this is 2023's growth, and this will look like that next year. So by mid-July of 24, the top of this tree will be full like this. And then this section right here will look like that section right there by this time in 2024. And this section will look like that section in 2024. So that's kind of the way they grow. They just naturally fill out these open areas, and they develop side branching. So those are, as I mentioned, brand new growth for this year. You can see it has no side branching on here at all. It's just all new growth. But then next year, this is going to start to develop a little bit of side branching, so that section will be relatively full like this next year, and then so on and so forth. So that's the way most evergreens grow. So even in the case of these Norway spruce right over here, in fact, this is, you can kind of get a little better example on this beautiful Norway spruce, and you can see this big bare central leader, and you're like, well, that looks weird. It's just the natural way that these trees grow, and if I can zoom in a bit, you can see those little kind of orangey tan colored pointy triangular shaped buds. Well, each of those buds is going to be a new branch next year. So that section is going to look like this section next year, and then so on and so forth as you work your way down. Norway spruce tend to really fill in very nicely, but we do not go along and cut that central leader. We want that to continue to develop. It's doing really, really well, so there's no reason to cut or top that at all. Same with this one right here. I mean, that's a beautiful tree. Now, we do not measure, when we sell these, we don't measure it to the tippy top of the tree. We basically measure it to this right here, the body of the tree. So in this case, even though this tree is probably tipping out at, I mean, it's probably close to 9 feet, 8.5 for sure. But we would sell this at at like 7 foot. That's, you know, right to there is about 7 feet. And then you have another 1.5 to 2 feet of growth up top. And that's just going to be, you know, new full branches. So by this time next year, that's going to be a really nice 9-footer, if we don't sell it this fall. So, kind of fun. So that's just a little bit about how we grow our trees. This particular property, we have a lot of our evergreens on right now, so that's obviously mostly what I showed you. Over in this field here, we have hundreds of green giant arborvitae with bamboo poles to keep those nice and straight and developing their central leader. So that's kind of a little bit about what we do out here. As I mentioned, we are herbicide free. We're basically pesticide free as well. We have some beautiful natural areas. We have a couple of water sources out on the property. Mill Creek originates on our property and is spring fed, bubbles up out of the ground. And then we have a kind of a spring fed pond on the property, and we have some beautiful natural areas that we leave and try to maintain as best we can to allow birds and wildlife and all of that kind of stuff to help keep our property healthy. So when we have a good, healthy ecosystem out here, we don't need to be spraying tons and tons of pesticide. That's a little bit about what we do out here. If you ever want, we do offer in the fall, oftentimes we will A, either take customers to the field to tag their trees, or B, we offer just some tours out here, like for our Fall Fest, which is, I think it's September 30th and October 1st this year, which is a fun family-oriented event. It is free to attend. The only thing you pay for would be food if you want it. Otherwise, we have all sorts of fun stuff out here, and we do hay wagon rides out into the nursery, and usually one of our staff members or myself will be on the wagon, just kind of giving you a little bit of a play-by-play as we're going through, so you know what you're seeing as we go. So, yeah, always fun to spend a morning with you. This is something I've been wanting to do for a little bit, just kind of show you how we grow our trees, what the nursery looks like out here. I wish I could show you all 140 acres of growing fields, but as I mentioned, that would be a very time-consuming process, so maybe we'll get to see some other areas at a later date, but I wanted to show you some of the evergreens here and just kind of show you the process of what goes into it. So I hope that you have a wonderful weekend, and I hope you get a chance to get outside. Be well.